All right. So we're here. We're here at RSA, and this is the Threatpost talk show. Threatpost talk show. Threatpost is a website. It's a news destination for cybersecurity news. We are covering the heck out of RSA, and we would love for you to come on by and take a look at the website and spend some time reading the stories and getting informed. And I'm pleased to be joined by Billy Rios. He is a legendary hacker and founder of WhiteScope Security. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So now, your emphasis, your research, and what you've been doing lately has been primarily within the medical device space. And I know that when you think about cybersecurity and you think about medical devices, there probably isn't anything more important than making sure that the medical devices that your life depends on are not infected with malware or somehow compromised by an attacker. Can you talk a little bit about your most recent research in that area and really what's on the line when it comes to cybersecurity and medical devices?
Yeah. You're right. Medical devices is actually pretty important. Really interesting devices, by the way. The ecosystem of medical devices spans a lot of different technologies. So you'll see things like Windows XP, you'll see things like Linux, but you'll also see like embedded devices as well. Embedded devices that are inside people, implanted devices. That's one of the areas that we're actually really interested in. If a device is inside of you, there's some challenges as to how you communicate with that device. It's usually over some type of radio protocol. That's kind of what our most recent research is about, how devices communicate with implanted medical devices. And then there's a whole litany of challenges as well. If a device is inside of you, how do you update it? How do you do something if it gets infected? How do you make sure that nothing bad happens, right? And then if something bad does happen, how do you respond to that? Thankfully, there's only a handful of devices that really go inside of a body. Those are pacemakers and some insulin pumps, neurostimulators. There's also some infusion pumps that go inside of a body as well. So, but obviously, if it's inside of you, then if something goes wrong, the consequences can be pretty dramatic, right? So.
Well, that's really unnerving. Like what kind of things can go wrong? Like what is on the line? And have we seen these types of vulnerabilities in the field? And have they had consequences to people's lives? And what they have there been really serious life or death consequences because of them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we look at exploiting medical devices, we kind of look at two different things. One is what's called intended functionality, and basically that just means making the device do that something it was kind of designed to do already. Like, for example, a pacemaker is designed to initiate a shock, deliver a shock, right? It's actually designed to do that. And so if someone can take over the communications path to a pacemaker, they might be able to initiate a shock at a time that it's not supposed to be initiated, right? So as far as the consequences go, if a device is implanted inside of you, probably means that you need it all the time, right? So there's only one reason that they do that, right? And so and if you need it all the time, that means it's probably pretty important to your well-being. So if anything happens to that device, even if it just doesn't work, like say, for example, you can't communicate with it when you need to, those could be pretty disastrous consequences as well, right?
Yeah, so now where has your research taken you? I know that you've published, you've been sort of renowned for some of your research there. Can you talk a little bit about the vulnerabilities? Was it malware? Was it some type of an attack against a medical device? Can you talk a little bit about what your company's found?
Yeah, some of the previous research we've looked at that's already been made public is actually using a medical device to hurt someone, kill someone, right? Like an infusion pump, we were able to compromise an infusion pump and make the pump literally deliver all of its drugs at one time, right? So, but the newest research that we've done is really focused on implanted devices. So pacemakers, neurostimulators, kind of the area that we're focusing on. I'm not ready to kind of share all the details just yet, but it's a pretty interesting space, right? There's a lot of different attack surface associated with those devices.
Well, how are these companies doing? mean, I know that medical companies and medical devices are famous for not being up with the times, using like the Windows 95 machines, in the back rooms. Are they getting the message? Are they heeding your warnings in terms of making sure that state-of-the-art cybersecurity is inside of medical devices?
I mean, some of them are, but we still have a long ways to go, right? So I'll give you an example. One of the pacemaker programmers we're looking at, it's like literally a Windows XP machine, right? So you wouldn't know that unless you hacked it, but once you get access to the file system, you realize that's like a really old computer, basically. And then I think some of the medical manufacturers just aren't very good at response and engineering. And what's kind of kept them alive so far is just obscurity, like getting a hold of these devices and being able to kind of look at them, right? So, but I would say that most of the device manufacturers that we work with, they're pretty good. They're pretty responsive. They take this pretty seriously. They do have some limiting factors that they have to kind of deal with. Like, it's not easy to pull a device out of someone's chest and replace it, right? So it's not easy to push out updates to medical devices that are supporting someone's life, right? So, but I think for the most part, the majority of the manufacturers we're working with are pretty receptive, but a handful, maybe aren't. So. Yeah.
I mean, are you aware of any recalls, or is that the way you'd have to do it? I mean, have there been any recalls or any talk of recalls, or how could you recall a medical device that had vulnerabilities?
Yeah, there actually has been one public recall, and then a lot of the research that we did a couple years ago actually resulted in the first FDA cybersecurity advisory ever, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more of this. I mean, that's not the preferred way, I think, because to be honest, it's really disruptive to patients. If you had a device or you were relying on a particular set of medical devices to help you live a better life, and then you had to turn those devices in and find something else, that's pretty disruptive, right? Especially if it's implanted. So that's probably not the preferred avenue, but it's happened, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it happening more in the future.
Well, I want to change the subject to something a little more less sort of grim, and I know that, and I don't know much about this, so I'm really excited that you can sort of help me better understand this internet-enabled car wash hacking, where you were able to do what? I mean, tell me a little bit about what this hacking proof of concept was all about.
Yeah. So it was actually a 3-year project. The guy that I worked with actually is back there, Dr. Jonathan Butts. But a couple years ago, we actually acquired some car wash software, and we did some vulnerability analysis, and I found some really neat vulnerabilities. And then the next step of it was to actually find like a real car wash that we could actually hack, right? So we spent a couple years begging car wash owners to let us hack their car wash. And surprisingly, car wash is actually pretty expensive. If you wanted to go buy one, which we thought about, it's like $800,000 to $1 million. So, but eventually we found a willing owner, and he let us exploit the car wash. I'm not going to say where it was, but there's about 300 or 400 of these car washes connected to the internet. So we did this attack over the internet, and we had someone drive through the car wash. We have this on video, and we make the car wash actually attack the vehicle, right? So as they're driving through, and what we're doing is actually slamming the doors onto the car. So and correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone knows differently, but I believe it's actually the first cybersecurity exploit of a device that causes the device to physically attack a person. So I don't think that's happened before. I think that's the first one. So
this is really where the machines start taking over, and they start smashing our cars and whatnot. How serious of a vulnerability was that? Was that that must have been in a remote exploitable type of scenario where you were able to get into what? I mean, can you just get a little geeky in terms of what it was that you were able to do?
Yeah, I mean, there's a set of exploits that we had. But the first one is to find the car washes on the internet, which is pretty easy, using Shodan and other things like that. And then most of these car washes are actually protected by a password. So we found another exploit that allows us to just bypass the password requirement. So whether a user reset the password or changed it or whatever, it doesn't matter. We could still take it over. And then the car wash actually had some safety mechanisms built into it, but we were able to defeat those safety mechanisms. So if you're just operating a car wash in its normal state, you actually can't cause the car wash to attack a car. The door won't slam onto the vehicle. The arm won't hit the car. So we actually had to patch those pieces of software and take those safety mechanisms out. And that's why we think the research is so important. I mean, we hacked a car wash and made it attack a car, but any physical system that can have physical movement, even if there's safety mechanisms built into it, the methodology is the same, right? So identifying the safety critical code, modifying the safety critical code in some way, and then actually leveraging the device to try to harm someone.
I mean, I think car washes are sort of an amusing sort of anecdote to the quite serious vulnerabilities that you found within these types of mechanisms. I mean, I'm just trying to think. I mean, where else do we come so close to these mechanisms that are vulnerable, that are accessible on Shodan, or you can see on Shodan? I mean, like, where do you go from car washes?
Yeah, that's a good question, because when we actually decided to target the car washes, we didn't just say, hey, let's hack car washes. We actually came up with a set of criteria that we wanted to look at for devices. And the criteria, there's 3 of them. The first criteria was had to be internet connected. The second criteria was had to be in a public space, so any person could encounter it. And then the last criteria were if the device were to be exploited, we could actually cause a safety issue. So certain industries have been dealing with this all the time. Like, so for example, manufacturing, they have robotics inside manufacturing. If a bug or the robotic were to manufacture, it could hurt someone. If there's a software glitch, it could hurt someone. So, and we know that, and the folks working in those industries know that as well. And they take precautions, like they wear hard hats and steel-toed boots, and they have safety cordons and things like that. So what we were interested in was like devices that we could exploit that could possibly hurt someone, but we're also in a public space. And right now, there's only really like a handful of devices that kind of meet all 3 criteria. A car wash is one of them. Anyone at any time could go through a car wash and get attacked by it. But in the future, there's probably going to be a lot more, right? So if we talk about any kind of robotics or artificial intelligence or drone technology, those devices are going to be internet accessible. They're going to be in public spaces, and if you exploit them, they could be used to hurt someone, right? So this is a reality we're definitely going to have to deal with for the foreseeable future.
Just to wrap things up, I mean, I think that is there a common thread that sort of connects your research with medical devices and your research with car washes? I mean, is there a common thread? What is it, and what does the future have in store for making sure that we live in a safer world?
Yeah, I mean, I think the common thread is that at the other end of the line of these devices, actually people. So hacking a car wash when no one's inside of it is probably not that interesting. Exploiting a medical device when it's not connected to someone's probably not that interesting. Well, it's not really interesting to us. And so at the end of the day, we have these devices that are connected, and those devices are connected to people in some way, right? And so if those devices are exploited, that means the human being that's connected to it has some consequence, whether it's their car gets attacked or their pacemaker shocks at a time it's not supposed to. So, and as far as the safety piece goes, there are a lot of safety consequences in the future here, right? So as we have more and more devices that surround us, and we interact physically with more and more devices, the opportunities for devices to get hacked and to hurt someone actually increases. So I know there's been a lot of attention, that's been paid to privacy and information protection and protection of things like credit cards and patient data and that sort of stuff. And that stuff's really important. And we're not saying it's not important, but when we look to the future, what's going to happen is these devices are going to have implications on our safety, right? So I think we need to think about that, because the way we defend against those types of attacks is a lot different.
Well, before I say goodbye, what kind of car was it that you destroyed in your car wash?
We had 2 cars, actually. I won't say what the second one was, but the first one was actually my friend's truck. And when we got to the car wash and he actually saw the car wash, he had already agreed that we would do this, but when we actually got there, he's like, no way, I'm not going to do this. And so he backed out. We had to find another vehicle. So.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming by. I really appreciated your time, and have a great rest of your show.